Hello there. I'm going to be taking this video a little bit differently in the sense that I'm not going to be going over a specific design per se, but rather a process. We both know my upload rate is abysmal, so this time I'm going to be doing a little bit more of an old school format. I'll have a script and I'm going to try to do this in as few takes as possible because I like to practice. But anyway, today's topic is going to be large-scale chunk loading. So a very quick recap for those who are new around here. The game breaks down your world into 16 by 16 block chunks. You can view these by clicking F3 and G, and a lot of things happen in chunks depending on how loaded they are. In chunk loading, there's really only 3 types you need to know about. First is entity processing chunks, which processes both entities and blocks, and this is what you see in normal gameplay. Surrounding entity processing chunks is a layer of lazy chunks or block ticking chunks. These process blocks but not entities, however the game knows these entities exist and we'll get back to them in a little bit. Lastly, surrounding lazy chunks is border chunks. These don't process blocks or entities, however likewise the game knows they exist. And a chunk loader just does what it says, it loads those chunks. But why exactly do people build chunk loaders to begin with? Well, the thing is that many things in this game don't necessarily need a player to be around them in order to work. So you could have a machine that does something, you can chunk load that machine, go elsewhere, work on a build, work on a house or something, and come back to progress done on that machine. The list of things you can chunk load is ever expanding, so realistically in the future, the only way you'll truly know is to just load a creative world and try it out for yourself. But I'll give some popular examples as to how chunk loaders are used. So one popular example is any entity-based machine. So in terms of farming, think iron golem farms, think bees producing honey. These are entities that do things and don't necessarily need a player to be around them in order to function. So because they're entities, you would place them in entity processing chunks. They would do their thing, you could go elsewhere and come back to resources. Another thing people use chunk loaders for is for mob switches. So I'm going to place zombies in each of these 3 chunks right now, right? And the thing is that I have a player that is very far away from here. Now the thing is that when I go into spectator, this zombie here has its AI processing. Because he's in an entity processing chunk, he's going to see that very far away player, and because he's very far away from that player, he'll immediately despawn. However, these 2 here, because they're in lazy and border chunks, their AI is not processing. They cannot process their AI to see that very far away player and despawn. However, the game knows they exist, hence this 2 out of 70. So hypothetically, if we had 70 of these zombies in the lazy and border chunks, we can trick the game into not spawning extra hostile mobs, which is essentially what a mob switch is. Now, the last reason, and probably the most versatile reason, is random ticks. So, random ticks were made in 1.21.5, random ticks were made so that way they happen in any entity processing chunk. Random ticks are responsible for any random event, so think for example crop growth, think budding amethyst working, think copper oxidizing, think cauldrons filling up with powder snow, think ice forming. These things rely on random ticks, so you could build a chunk loader for these, especially the slower ones, go elsewhere and come back to resources. So now we know why people build chunk loaders. So how exactly do we load chunks? So there's 3 main methods people use to load chunks. First is obviously the player. The player loads a distance with the square radius of the simulation distance. So currently my simulation distance is set to 5, so I'm loading 5 chunks on the left, the center chunk I'm in, and 5 chunks on the right for an 11 by 11 entity processing area. Next is pearls. These load a 1 by 1 entity processing area in the chunk that it's in. And lastly is portals. All 3 types load a 3 by 3 entity processing chunk area. And note that the lazy and border chunks always come with entity processing chunks, right? But what if we want to go bigger? Say for example I have a 3 by 3 chunk area of cauldrons I want filled up with powder snow, and an ice cube maker somewhere else, and I want to chunk load both at the same time. What if, for example, I have flower farms spread across multiple biomes and I want to chunk load all of them at the same time? So that's what this video is going to be about, because I feel like chunk loading is one of the most versatile tools you can have that is underutilized. And I feel like this is because of 2 parts. One is because, and you could search this up yourself if you want, any chunk loading tutorial on the internet right now only goes over 1 pearl or 1 portal, right? So that's reason number 1, and nobody really tells you how to do multiple portals at once. Nobody really tells you how exactly to use chunk loaders, etc. Second part is also because you always have these people that come up with half-baked thoughts as counterpoints, or as their quote counterpoints. So they'll say something like, oh man, just get a second to counter a bot. Damn, all the servers you're in lets you do that? Congrats. Screw whatever the next guy gotta say, I guess. Or they'll say something like, oh man, just AFK at it overnight. Damn, you don't have an electricity bill because you're still stuck in the basement? Congrats. I don't know about the next guy though. Stuff like that. So chunk loading, I feel like, is a very underutilized potential that not too many people know about. And this video will hopefully clear that up and make you confident enough to load large-scale areas. But before we get to that, it's important for us to know how portals work to begin with, because when people get these, how the portals work to begin with, wrong, then they are less confident in chunk loading their area. So we're going to clear up any misconceptions and just briefly go over how portals work. So in terms of chunk loading, there's only really 4 properties you need to know. First one clears up a massive misconception. A lot of people think portal linking is based on the block position of the portal, however this is not true. Portal linking is actually based on the entity position itself. So what the game does is that when an entity walks through the portal, it takes the position of that entity, translates it into the destination dimension, then takes the block position of that translated entity position, which is functionally rounding down or floor function for my CS people, right? Before finding a portal. So property 1 is the linking is based on the translated entity position, or TEP. Now, I forgot to say this, so really quickly, translated entity position is where the x and z coordinates gets divided or multiplied by 8, whether or not you're going to or from another, y coordinate stays the same, alright? Now, we could prove property 1 with this very simple setup. I have 4 portals, 2 red, 2 blue, 2 upper, 2 lower. And then another here, I got 1 portal, right? Now, when I walk through this portal, on this blue side, for example, my TEP is slightly shifted towards the blue side. So when I went through, I come out on the blue side. And I could do the same with the red side. So if I come through here, slightly on the red side, my TEP slightly shifted towards the red, I come out on the red side. And this is 3-dimensional, so if I hop on the scaffolding, now my TEP is slightly higher. Now I come out on the top red side, same with the top blue side. So that's how linking works. So now we know how portals are linked. Now we need to go over how they're loaded. So the thing is that only the destination gets loaded, and based on the wiki, the destination gets loaded for 15 seconds. We can prove this with this very simple clock here. So we're clocking this dropper to dispense items into a portal. If I go into spectator, because I have it so that way my spectator doesn't generate chunks, this area is unloaded, and because only the destination gets loaded, this clock stops, right? So now we know that only the destination gets loaded, but there is a small glaring problem, is that we know that the portal loads a 3x3 area, but what if the portal is bigger than a chunk? How does the game center that 3x3 area? And it ties back to TEP. So when I was sending items into this portal, right, the TEP of those items was actually mapping to around here. Now what the game does with this TEP is that it searched for a nearby portal in order to link to. So in this case, it linked to this slice right here. And because it linked to this slice, this center is actually the center of the 3x3. So property 2 is that the destination is loaded for 15 seconds, centered at the closest portal to the TEP, right? Now, you may notice that the green concrete that I sent through is on this side over here. And this is because of property 3. So property 3 happens after the linking and all that, and it's that the entity placement within the exit portal is proportional to the position of entry. What this means is that if I go in from the left side here, I come out from the left side. I go in from the middle here, I come out from the middle, and if I went in from the right side like those items did, I come out from the right side. And this is also 3-dimensional, so if I jump up a block and walk in, I come out a block above, and if this portal was taller, I would come out much higher above, etc. And P2 and P3 is exactly why lazy looting works. So if you ever see those end-of-life farms, those EOL farms, they force the mob to spawn on one side of the portal. P2 has their TEP over here, centers the chunk loading on this chunk, but P3 would place them in lazy chunks, right? And then you could do your lazy looting shenanigans. So P2 and P3 is exactly why lazy looting works, if anyone was ever curious. Now before we go on, I need to really quickly expand on P1 a little bit. So if I went through the portal on this side here, my TP is going to be very, very far away from the initial portal I went through. So if I go through, the game generated a new portal. So these two were actually some separate generation attempts, right? And if I break this and went back through on that side, this portal will generate again. So this is a slight modification at P1, is that the game searches a 128 block radius for a portal link. Otherwise, it creates a new one based on the TEP. So when I'm going from the Nether to the Overworld, it searches a 128 block radius. But if I'm going from the Overworld to the Nether, it will be a 16 block radius, alright? Now my friend Potato Nor, he goes more into detail about portal creation and whatnot. However, in this video, I'm going to assume that the portals are pre-placed and already linked based on your knowledge, alright? So the thing is that we have P1, P2, and P3, right? Now we need P4. So the thing is that out of this portal, it's facing north-south, right? So if I walk through, now I'm facing east. And this is because this portal right here is facing east-west. So P4 is a very simple one. The rotation is preserved if the portals are parallel, otherwise rotate 90 degrees clockwise. So I'm facing east right now, I go through, I face south, I go through, I face west, and I go back through, and I face north. So now we got all the properties we need to load chunks, so let's get on to loading some chunks. Now the thing is that before you ever even start building, it's an important idea to know your specs. So in this case right here, I have a 9x6 area I want to make entity processing. I've already gone ahead and linked these chunks based on P1, and they're all facing the same direction based on P4. So we only really need P2 and P3 in order to create a chunk loading grid. Now the thing is that P2 says I need an entity coming out from all these chunks in order for them to be loaded based on P2. Now the other thing that I know that I want with this chunk loading grid is that I want to control it with a single lever. So if I flick this lever, I'm eventually going to have entities coming out through all these portals, right? Now, the thing is that the best item I think that can do that, the best entity, would be minecarts. More specifically, chest minecarts, because they retain their momentum better than empty minecarts, right? So the thing is that we can have a dispenser at the start, send the minecart through this portal, then use rails to send it to the next portal, then use rails to send it to the next portal, so on and so forth. So that's my choice of entity that's going to be used to fulfill P2. Now the thing is that when I build these, I like to start with knowing where I'm going with the minecart. So thing is that I want to start from this portal, and then I'm going to figure out where I want to go next. So in this case, I want to go from this portal to this portal. So I'm going to place some blocks here, because I know I want the minecart to go from here to here. So I'm just going to place some rails to begin with, alright? And from this first link, I like to start with the end, actually. So thing is that when I did Nyquist spots, one of my friends, he called the ending the kill shot, and I like that term, so I'm going to be doing the same. So the thing is that the kill shot is from the very last portal to the very start. Now the trick that I use for clean wiring is that I wire the kill shot from the ending adjacent to the starting portal, right? So I'm going to do exactly that. So I'm going to place these rails on here, so now the minecart is coming in from here to this portal. Now we need to go to the overworld in order to catch this minecart and put it back in the dispenser that's going to be dispensing the minecart. P3 says the minecart's going to come out from top left south, so I'm going to go top left south, catch that minecart, and then send it to the dispenser. Now the dispenser I like to keep on the same side as this ending kill shot, so dispenser is facing here, it's facing the other end, right? Now I'm just going to place 2 hoppers, that's all I really need. And then I just need something to break this cart. I'm going to be using the lava cauldron technique because that's my preference, but if you have your own preference, by all means, do something else, you know? And then all I do is that I just go through, place all these rails down, and then at the top here, just place a chest so that way the cart slightly clips into this lava cauldron. However, the item, it will be over this hopper and then get collected into this dispenser, right? So now we have the ending, now we need the beginning. So when we first turn this thing on, everything is unloaded, right? So when we first turn this thing on, minecart gets sent through here. Now P2, because of P2, only the Nether is loaded. Technically I'm loading this area based on P1. So what I want to do is I want to send it back to this portal so that way we immediately chunk load this area so that way I can leave sooner, because technically right now only I'm loading this area based on my player, not the portal. So I want to send this minecart back to the overworld. So I'm going to do exactly that. So P3 said that it's facing top left south, so I'm going to go top left south and send it right back into this portal, right? Now, the reason why I go out a little further than you think is because minecarts have a cooldown between entering portals. That cooldown is half a second, so this amount of rails makes sure that cooldown expires. So now the minecart will come through here, go into here, it'll come out facing top left north, and we could show that. Now it comes out facing top left north based on those two properties we just went over. So now we want to catch the cart. Now we know we're loading this area based on P2. So now we need to send this minecart back to the nether so that way we could send it off to the next portal. So I'm going to do exactly that. So we catch the minecart, we go through, and we feed it back in. So I'm going to wire that up right now, or connect the rails for that. Now I'm not facing the best direction because of this directionality stuff, so I gotta do this, and can't do that, but can do that. Alright, so now minecart goes through, goes into this portal, faces top left north, which is where the first rail is. So that's how you do clean wiring when it comes to this. So now the minecart comes from here, it goes into this portal facing top left north, so now we're loading this portal based on P2. So we got all we came for with this one, so we just need to catch that minecart and bring it back into this portal. So we just need to feed it back, so I'm going to do exactly that right now. And then power the rails. So now the minecart comes out, we feed it back in, same direction, P3, catch it, load this portal now, use this P2, load this portal, feed it back, catch it, and now you could kind of see the pattern. So then we just go through all these other portals, we go into them to load them, we catch it based on P3, feed it back, catch it, portal, feed it back, catch it, portal, and so on until we get to the kill shot, which is at the very end, and then we link it back into the dispenser, right? And that's it. And you could do this for any arbitrary area, and yeah, you could just do that. Now we just need a clock in order to be able to load this. So thing is that we use a clock because if you have a very large grid, for example, it's going to take more than 15 seconds for the minecart to come back into here. So a clock is used for redundancy. Now the clock, it doesn't need to be any specific type of clock. You'll see some examples. In this case, I'm going to be using an 8 comparator clock as an example right here. So what's going to happen is that I power this, the power goes through all of here, then this repeater powers, 15 minus 15 is 0, so then we turn this off, now the pulse extender is working. So now we send the minecart through, and you can see that the grid is loading on the spot. Now, some things to know is that portal linking, as you may have heard throughout this whole video, is independent of seed. I did not mention seed or anything, so if you have a creative world with the portals in the exact same position, you'll get the exact same results. Another thing you may know is that, is this the most efficient? Probably not. You can mix in P4 and probably save up on some rails, but I think this is much easier to follow in this demonstration. And lastly is that you may wonder why I have the rails suspended here. The reason why I have these rails suspended here is for redundancy. Things can end up in these portals, and they may potentially block the minecart. More specifically, if a player is nearby these portals in the overworld, zombie pigmen can spawn in these portals because they spawn based on random ticks, and they could potentially block the minecart. So we use P3 to have the minecarts go above those pigmen, and because there's nothing for them to jump up onto, they won't jump, they won't cause a problem. Alright, so this is an overworld grid example. What about another example? So in this example right here, I have a 5x3 chunk area that I want to make entity processing. So I go through, I place these portals down. Now, the reason why we have 3 portals here is because when the minecart goes through this portal, only here is entity processing. Here would be lazy. Thing is that we can't send the minecart into lazy chunks because its AI would make it stop moving around here. So we need this intermediate portal here to make this portal entity processing so that way we could send the minecart into here in order to make this side entity processing. Is this the most efficient? Probably not, but again, this is much easier to follow. Now I know I'm going from this portal, this portal, this portal, so I have the kill shot going from the last portal adjacent to the first line here and into this dispenser with this redundant chest as an example as to how an expanded version would look, right? And then I have this clock here. This clock is based on I Hate Flying Block. From him, you just open the trapdoor, and then the furnace minecart moves. This detector rail briefly unpowers, powers the dispenser, sends the minecart, and you can see on the chunk debug on the top right that this is working. This is loading the 5x3 area. So you have both of these in a world download as an example as to what you could do with arbitrary chunk loading. You could see that it doesn't necessarily need to be a tutorial, you just need to remember some properties and just how to use rails and maybe just a clock at best, and then you could chunk load any area you want. So hopefully you learned something new today. Have a wonderful day.